It is silent at this time. The school is in lockdown. Your request at the stage, Methodist Church, St. Luke Center. I will need 2 ambulances at this time.
Okay, these units in the school, I got bodies here. Let's get ambulances.
And again, that is what it sounded like this morning on police radios at the time of the shooting. There are, of course, 911 recordings that will be coming in later. Also, that is the extent of police conversation that we have obtained so far. We really didn't hear that much radio traffic once officers were inside the school working with emergency crews, but we will keep you posted. In the newsroom, I'm Dave Evans, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, David, thank you very much. I have to say, one of the eeriest and saddest images that we have seen so far today, as they were talking and calling for ambulances to be brought in. We saw that long line of ambulances outside the firehouse where families were being reunited with their children, and they all just sat there idling for hours today. And we now know why, because 20 of the victims were children, a total of 27 of them killed today, gunned down by, as officials have now identified, 20-year-old Adam Lanza.
So many people and so many officials have been checking in. The president, of course, Attorney General has been involved. We've heard from Connecticut Governor. Mayor Bloomberg just sent out this tweet, and the quote says, "My deepest sympathies are with the family of those affected, and my determination to stop this madness is stronger than ever."
We're joined now by Sal LaFieri, who's a security expert. And Sal, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us today. So what is now the next step? Obviously, the building, the school is secure. We've got several federal agencies that are on scene. We've got local police that are on scene. We've got a massive crime scene. So how do they start piecing this together? And also talk to us about the children who are involved in this.
Well, one of the first things that will have to happen, and the investigators will do when they get there, is get everybody to stop and take a deep breath. The exigent circumstances are over with. The rescue is over with. Now they start the investigatory process, and there's a lot of different things that need to be done. Having investigated children's homicides and cases involving little ones for a number of years, the witnesses are very difficult with having children as witnesses. They make very good witnesses, but it takes a very long time to go through the conversation with them. Clearly, they're traumatized. They'll be influenced by things that they're hearing. They'll be influenced by what the parents are saying. So the crime scene in this particular case is going to take a longer time to process, because you have to get to the scene. You have to see where the bodies are. There's ballistics evidence that we need to be looking at. We need to make sure what weapons were fired. Law enforcement has to be interviewed, and that's another thing. The officers that first responded to this.
I can only imagine.
It's pretty tough to be the first one to respond to that.
You know, we looked at faces of staff members, adults walking away as if they had just walked away from a war zone. I mean, their faces were just completely shocked, blood out of their faces. They were crying. They were turning to each other for support. I can't even imagine how they could even process what happened. I mean, what kind of a witness? You're just diving for cover half the time.
But interestingly, though, it seems like the teachers in the school system, we understand from the preliminary reports at least, is that the school had done a number of planning processes for stuff like this. And initially, it appears that what they've done was clearly, according to the protocols that were established. The story about the teacher locking the door and not even letting the person in, it's just textbook. And for her to be able to keep her wits about her, and to be able to act in that capacity in that situation is just fascinating.
So let me ask you this shooting, an unprecedented shooting, because it happened at an elementary school and because of the number of people who were killed today. Clearly, schools, high schools, middle schools, they are usually more prepared for something like this. But at an elementary school where they seem to have taken every single precaution necessary, what do you do? How do you protect against something like this?
One of the things I think we really need to do at this point, this is where, the deep breath comes in. We all want to quickly rush to some form of a judgment and be able to figure out what the solution is going to be so it doesn't happen tomorrow. I think we need to take a look at some of the studies. The U.S. Secret Service has done a study on school shootings. Revisit that, look at that, see what we can come up with, if we can apply any of those lessons learned to, in essence, the forensics that's going to be done, the psychological forensics, if you will, of this, to see What were the triggers? What were the things that we may have been able to pick up?
You know, I guess it's going to take a long time before we can get inside the mind of a guy that would do something like this. Obviously, we know very little about 20-year-old Adam Lanza, being told is the shooting suspect. But what we're hearing at this point that one of the victims is his own mother in this school. We know that the guy dressed in black with bulletproof on, and he goes in with kids who aren't going to give him much of a fight, armed with automatic weapons, more than one, like he was ready to do a shootout. Still don't know how he died, whether he killed himself or whether somehow something happened along the way. Hearing all of that, is there a profile like you can call early on to kind of get a sense of what we're dealing with here?
All of the studies that have been done by the Secret Service, by the FBI, that have looked extensively into this and looked at profiles for threateners and for shooters, there is no profile that has developed of an individual shooter. One of the things we have to keep in mind with this, you don't stop this at the door of the school.
Right.
This gets stopped way before. And I'm sure what we're going to wind up seeing is that there were red flags. I mean, think about it.
Right.
This guy walks in and shoots his mother and 18, 20 children.
Right. That tells you something is not right.
That didn't happen because there was a problem over breakfast this morning. This is something that occurred over a period of time.
You, as you said, you've investigated child homicides for many years. You have been to these horrific crime scenes. What will it take for these first responders to be able to regroup and move on? And for this community?
The community is going to be devastated, as you know, all of the families have been touched. Excuse me. The first responders are pretty resilient. They'll spend some time talking amongst themselves and kind of working it out. I'm sure the departments are going to be, aware of that and offering up some form of counseling if the officers want it themselves. But it's something that you recognize that you're a professional and this is part of your job, and just having to go through the process of giving the witness, because the first officers, are going to have to give witness statements just as any other one. So as the officers go through the witness statements and go through the process, there's sort of a healing effect, a sort of a cathartic effect out of that. But I'm sure they'll bounce back.
You know, I've seen too many of these kind of cases, and it struck me when I watched some of these officers coming out, right away comforting each other. And often you'll see these things where some of the hardened veterans, they just stick with the job they got to do, and you think to themselves they're like Iron Men and the emotion does not affect them. But you saw it clearly. It was so dramatic, and I think that it just heightened the sense of what a horror this must have been like for those people. We know it from the outside, but to be inside and see it, it was just laid out there for all of us to witness.
One of the parents earlier had said in one of the earlier broadcasts was that she saw one of the officers walk out, and he said to her that it was the worst thing that he's ever seen. And she knew him to be, over a 20-year veteran.
Let's talk a little bit more about the investigation. Early reports, we're talking about some significant, if it's an assault rifle, it sounds like some of those bullets could have even gone through the walls there. This is not, it's so thick. It's meant to stop bullets like this.
Unfortunately, when you get into the weeds in these kind of cases, you're talking about, small children, kindergarten, age children. You're not talking about a whole lot of stopping power from, it's when it's going through an adult as compared to a child, which is why the forensics and why they're going to have to take so much time going through the crime scene. You want to know the angles of where the shooter shot from, how many children might have been hit with the same bullet.
It's just sickening to talk about.
It gets worse as you get into it, but those are the things that are going to wind up going through and happening. I mean, if there's any solace in this, the shooter is dead, and it saves us from going through a trial.
And putting those children who may have witnessed something
through
a trial as well. Can you talk a little bit, because clearly there was some confusion today. I guess perhaps understandably so, considering the everything that transpired over the last few hours, but obviously initially several sources had revealed that it was Ryan Lanza who was the gunman, when it turned out that it was Lanza's younger brother Adam. Any idea of how that confusion could have happened?
They're relatively close in age from what I understand. One's 20, one's 24.
Right.
I understand that some of the original information came in from Facebook.
Right.
And there was sort of an identification that way. you know, in situations like this, the information's breaking so quickly. You know, sometimes, you know, law enforcement's doing the same exact thing we're doing here at the studio, trying to figure out what's going on and what's the next step. And that's where you wind up getting into Hoboken. And then for law enforcement, you're thinking, you know, could the brothers have been in cahoots together?
Well, remember, there is a secondary crime scene, and they say there's an adult dead at that scene, so we've yet to find out the whole picture here. It's sounding like there was a murder before the massacre, at least one before the massacre.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where at the speed at which this is breaking and the way it's developing, you know, you have really no clue, I mean, how this is going to wind up working out.
So what do you tell a school system that comes to you and says, all right, listen, we've got to step things up. How can we ensure that what happened there cannot happen in our school district? What could you possibly say to them?
You know, it's funny, I'm actually doing consulting right now for a job for clients out in the eastern end of Long Island on similar situations, including cyberbullying. And one of the things that we talk to them about all the time is, you know, again, as I said earlier, this isn't something you stop at the door at the day that this guy shows up with a gun.
Right.
That you have to start noticing the warning signs ahead of time, recognizing that domestic violence situations, and this could very well, you know, politically classified as, you know, domestic violence, realizing that a domestic violence situation may be brewing at home and may carry over. We see it in the workplaces all the time. We're willing to accept it there. Schools are pretty much sacred ground, and we really don't want to have anything bad or being, you know, any sort of negativity brought to a school. But it's important that if you do have problems at home, if people are under orders of protection, that the schools know about it, and that's how you start to get in front of some of it. There is no silver bullet to any of this, but that's one option that is available.
I guess the obvious question is then, because Lanza's mother was killed today at the school, is it safe to assume then that she was the primary target and perhaps that the 26 others were just...
We don't know who the other victims were in the room. There may be, and I mean, and again, this is pure speculation. I mean, you don't know. There could have been an aide or someone that he may have had, you know, been romantically linked to, who may have broken up. She may have been a target.
You can go through a list of scenarios.
You can go through a list of scenarios. You really don't know at this point.
We're still early on.
Yeah.
Okay, Sal, stand by. We appreciate you,
Thank you, Sal.
Staying with us. We're going to check in right now with Jim Hoffer. He is actually at Lanza's parents' house, which is in Newtown, where police have been throughout the afternoon. Jim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. You know, the Lanza home is about, I would say, maybe 300 yards behind me. The state police, of course, have cordoned it off. We are kept from going anywhere near it. We can tell you, though, that there is at least one body. The body of a female woman was discovered in this home on Yogananda Street, 36 Yogananda Street, shortly before 2 o'clock. This afternoon. That's what we're being told. She had a gunshot wound to her head, and she was discovered on the second floor. We don't know who it is. We do know that this is the home of the mother of the alleged shooter, Nancy Lanza, but she is a teacher, and we can assume probably she was at work today at the Newtown Elementary School. What we have joining us right now is a woman who lives in this neighborhood. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Your name is Marcia Moskowitz, and you, for many years, drove bus for the Newtown School District, correct?
Yes, I was an owner-operator for the town of Newtown, and Sandy Hook Elementary School was one of my schools.
And we know that the school is about 5 miles from here, and you drove a lot of the students from this neighborhood for many years, correct?
Yes, this was my route since 1999, so I knew a lot of the kids. Some of them are in college now, and from kindergarten on up to high school.
You have been speaking with some of the parents today. Tell us about that, the discussions you've been having.
Well, needless to say, the town is in shock, disbelief, and just praying that the families that have lost their children can get through this, especially at this holiday time.
How has this hit you? Obviously, you've driven bus, and you've taken for many years students back and forth, perhaps even some of the students today that were involved in the crisis. You must be going through a lot.
Well, needless to say, it's not just me, it's everybody. Tragic, disbelief, It's unbelievable to think that somebody could have such a problem with their lives that they have to take out little innocent children. I feel for the whole entire community, everyone who perished, but particularly the kids, because they had their whole lives to look forward to, and they were so innocent.
Mrs. Moskowitz, thanks very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it.